Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at this Community Resources Network Ireland Biennial Conference on Jobs and Skills in a Circular Economy. We have chosen to use Hop-In today because it's very interactive, and if you're a bit like me, you might be getting tired of online events at this stage. So we've designed two really interactive, engaging afternoon sessions focused on discussion, hearing your feedback, facilitating networking and connections. And I think this is one of the first conferences I've ever organized that involves almost no slide presentations at all. And what we really want to get to the heart of with all this discussion is, with all the momentum, with so much going on at European and national level in terms of a green recovery, a Green Deal, just transition, climate action, and all of the European and national policy development around social and circular economy, how can we make sure this all leads to growth and more jobs in the circular economy, and particularly those activities at the heart of a circular economy, which are prevention, reuse, and repair? And by a circular economy, what we mean is an economy where we keep all our products, like our clothes, the laptop you're watching on, and our desks, and our materials like plastic, cardboard, and metal in the economy for as long as possible. And this means moving away from today's take, make, dispose model to really valuing the resources we have through better design, through prevention, reuse, repair, refurbishment, upcycling, lending, and recycling. And this doesn't just have significant environmental impacts, but also economic impacts, supporting local communities, and social impacts. And it's those social impacts, or more specifically, the potential to build jobs and skills that we want to focus on in our two afternoon sessions. So we have a really packed agenda. Today we'll focus on jobs, and we'll hear from policymakers and researchers, networks, and CRNI members on what do we really mean by circular jobs, what's happening in Europe and nationally around job creation in this area, and we'll find out what these big funds and these policy drivers might do to help deliver real growth in jobs in reuse and repair here in Ireland. Tomorrow the focus will be on skills, and we'll look then at where are the gaps to building skills for circular transition and what can we do to fill them. And we'll also hear from CRNI members then about some of the exciting new training programs they're delivering. We do feel this is an important conversation, so I'm delighted to share that the Chartered Institutes of Waste Management has confirmed this event will count toward continual professional development for its members. A little bit about our network. You saw the video at the start. We were set up to support social enterprises in reuse, repair, and recycling. And in 2020, our members provided over 800 full and part-time jobs, 820 labour activation scheme positions, so that's two community services programme, community employment, rural social scheme, as well as over 8,600 volunteers, and all of that contributed to around 18,000 tonnes being reused. Here in Ireland, as elsewhere in Europe, social enterprise plays a really pivotal role in the circular economy, both for practicing and innovation. And some recent research we've done with Clean Technology Centre and the Rediscovery Centre found, which was funded by the EPA, it involved mapping out everyone in the second-hand retail sector in Ireland, and we found that around 1,247 were involved in this area, and just under half, or the majority actually, were not-for-profit or social enterprise. And the reason why reuse, repair, and recycling is so suited to this social enterprise model is, firstly, it's very labor intensive. It involves handling a whole range of different kinds of products that need cataloging and cleaning and repairing. And this also means it's really suited to a very broad range of skills or training potential. Reuse and repair are also very localized. It means keeping your goods in local circulation so it can support communities and regions. And these activities support a broad range of social aims, not just creating jobs and training for people who are often at distance from the labour market, but can also support low-income families by making affordable household goods and help raise funds for charitable aims. And as I said, social enterprises are also pioneers and driving research in this area. So our job as a network is to support these members, to share knowledge and networking opportunities, and to try and help bring this area into the mainstream as well through policy and research. And you can find out more about our work in the Expo area, which you can visit anytime until close tomorrow, and where you'll also find information about all of our speakers and our members and other CRNI members joining the conference today. Please also feel free to share any moments from today or tomorrow via social media, and we're using a hashtag #JobsForCE, which will pop into the chat soon. Now, all of this work, including the event today, would simply not be possible without the annual funding we receive from the Environmental Protection Agency under the National Waste Prevention Programme. And so I'm really delighted to welcome Mary Frances Rochford, who is Programme Manager with the EPA and responsible for climate change and circular economy programs, to say a few words. Thank you, Mary.
Hi, Claire. Thanks very much for the very warm welcome. I'd like to thank Claire and the Community Resources Network Ireland for organising what I think is going to be a really engaging conference today and for tomorrow afternoon. The aim of this conference really is about exploring how we can make the most of current policy and funding landscape to create real career opportunities in the transition to a more circular economy. We know that the momentum for driving the circular economy is really strong in Ireland at the moment, and over the past year we've seen some really significant policy developments driving a wide variety of strategic plans and programmes. We see that in last September we had the launch of the National Waste Policy, a waste action plan for a circular economy, and this stemming from this, we'll see new legislation, a circular economy bill to be introduced to provide legislative support underpinning many measures. More recently, the department has launched the draft Circular Economy Strategy, which is a national policy framework for Ireland's transition to a circular economy that is currently out for public consultation by the Department of Environment until the 11th of June. And we see that this strategy has 5 key objectives, including to deliver sustainable and regionally balanced economic growth and employment. The EPA's own National Waste Prevention Programme's mission is to prevent waste and to drive the circular economy in Ireland. The National Waste Prevention Programme is reconfiguring into a National Circular Economy Programme, and a public consultation is also open until the 11th of June in relation to our new programme. The EPA is under the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy has a designated coordination role to support the Department of the Environment and to oversee national, regional and local activities to improve coherence, align national and local activities and to ensure maximum impact. Then to go back to the last but by no means least in this list of policies and plans and programmes is the National Waste Management Plan for a Circular Economy that is also in development at the moment. And this new plan will have the circular economy at its heart, with targets for reuse, repair, resource consumption and reducing contamination. We also see that there are a number of cross-sectoral developments like the Climate Action Plan and the National Social Enterprise Strategy and the Rural Development Policy, which all show real ambition and signal a pivotal time for the circular and social economy. Of course, all of this national work is underpinned by the EU Green Deal, as Claire mentioned, a set of policy initiatives by the European Commission, which sets an overarching aim of making Europe climate neutral by 2050. Circularity is central to the EU Green Deal and requires the EU to restructure policies across many areas, including clean energy supply, industry, production and consumption, large-scale infrastructure, transport, food and agriculture, construction, taxation, and social benefits. Large-scale financial instruments are being established to help meet the Green Deal objectives. And we see these to include the 7.5 billion Just Transition Fund, the Sustainable Europe Investment Plan, which will release more than 1 trillion of sustainable investments over the next decade. We have Horizon Europe, which will provide significant investment in research and innovation and investment in education and training through the proposed European Social Fund, which will help workers acquire the skills that they need to transfer from declining sectors into growth areas. At a national level, this week we've seen the launch of Ireland's Recovery Plan, which is a stated aim to deliver a pathway to a strong, resilient economy aligned with the government's green and digital ambitions. We already see a growing number of circular economy, innovation and demonstration funding supports for community and social enterprises, charities, SMEs and non-SMEs. These offer an opportunity to demonstrate an innovation for the circular economy within these enterprises, with the potential for new service models, new businesses, and new approaches to the circular economy in Ireland, which will grow jobs. To mention just some of these funding opportunities, the EPA's own Green Enterprise Innovation for a Circular Economy Fund will launch shortly, targeting large-scale enterprises and grant aid of up to 100,000 per applicant, per successful applicant. The department's own Circular Economy Grant Scheme was launched in April, aimed at community, voluntary and NGO-led initiatives and smaller scale enterprises of up to 50 employees. We have also Circulair's Innovation Grant Scheme, focused on the manufacturing sector and limited to Circulair members, but also offering considerable grant funding up to 250,000. And then Enterprise Ireland's Climate Enterprise Action Fund, which provides a range of supports for their clients, from vouchers to grant aid awards, consultancy assistance for climate and sustainability related activities, including the circular economy. So just to the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the new policies, the new supports that are available, and also building on some existing programs that are there too. As we come out of the pandemic, we are still required under public health restrictions to meet virtually, but we're very conscious of the importance of rebuilding the recovery and making that recovery a sustainable one. And we see that the European Commission's Recovery and Resilience Fund aims to help member states deal with the costs of COVID pandemic and to boost the European economic recovery through providing grant aid support. We also see that there is tremendous potential for jobs and skills in the circular economy through both policy and funding opportunities. These jobs that will contribute to our reduction in our carbon footprint and help Ireland meet its climate targets. A 2018 EU Commission report on the impact of the circular economy policies on the labour market estimated that circular transition could deliver an additional 700,000 jobs across the EU at all skill levels by 2030. We see this also supported through various other initiatives and reports, including the European RREUSE network estimates that reuse or repair for reuse of just 2% of additional waste currently generated in the EU could help to reduce our CO2 emissions by 5% while supporting around 400,000 jobs per year. Around over 400,000 jobs. The potential for job creation in the circular economy covers a broad skills base and a wide geographic distribution, including rural areas and areas of economic and social deprivation. These activities include trade and craft skills, industry-specific skills, life skills, and business skills. Many of these skills are associated with sectors that have gone into decline, and it is reflected in the European Commission report, which states that the highest number of top shortage occupations were among the craft group. This conference on jobs and skills in the circular economy will provide us with the insights and the opportunities for discussion on potential for jobs and skills in the circular economy in Ireland. My hope is that at the end of this event, you will have gained valuable insights, made new connections, and identified at least one action to take away. As I close, I'd just like to remind you all to input and to participate in the current public consultations that are open on the EPA's Draft Circular Economy Programme and on the Department of Environment's Draft Circular Economy Strategy, both of which are open until the 11th of June. Your insights and experience are key to delivering national programmes that will deliver for the Circular Economy Ireland. I'd like to thank you for your attention and wish you an enjoyable afternoon, and I now hand you back to Claire.
Thank you so much, Mary Frances, for those words. And I think what you've said just shows how much is going on and that there is just so much potential for this sector. And we're also really pleased to see the strong focus on reuse and repair in the new consultation you mentioned on circular economy programme, which is due to close next week. And I would also really encourage people to make a submission to this and also to look at the Green Enterprise programme that Mary Frances mentioned, which has facilitated so much excellent research and demonstrations take place. So next up, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Cara Augustenborg, who will be facilitating our first panel discussion today. Cara is a well-known environmental scientist, climate change lecturer, writer, and activist based in Ireland. She's an environmental policy fellow at UCD and a presenter of News Talk's Down to Earth show. So thank you very much, Cara. And I'll let you introduce the panel now. Thanks.
Thanks, Claire. It's really great to be part of this event. As you know, I'm a huge fan of CRNI and all the work that you do, particularly the Reuse Month that you champion that, and you're such an awareness raiser for that. And I rely on that a lot. Media work. I think we have a little sound problem there. Thanks so much, the guys at StreamFox. So yeah, Reuse Month is a great inspiration to those of us who are following your work. And I'll start off by showing you my latest reuse project. It's definitely a Pinterest fail, but just to give you a sense, I've taken an old typewriter and I've turned it into a planter. I hope that will improve over time. But a little bit of inspiration there from your work to mine. I'm not here to show you all of my upcycling projects. Actually, we're very much here to talk about policy. And so I'm delighted to be able to welcome the 4 guests who are going to participate in the opening conversation for this, which will really talk about a lot of the issues that Claire and Mary highlighted in terms of what are circular jobs and where are we headed with all of these exciting new policies around the Green New Deal and the just transition and how that relates to circular jobs. And one of the reasons I'm so happy to have this conversation with you all is because as an academic, oftentimes over the last decade, I've been approached by students or prospective students who want to get involved in work in climate change and work in sustainability. And up until about 5 years ago, I almost hesitated to reply to them about job opportunities because those of us who were working in this area were very much doing so on a volunteer capacity. And it was much more of a hobby than a career. But certainly in recent years, all of that has changed. And I'm so happy now that when I'm approached by young people who want to engage in this, that actually I can say, yes, there are lots of jobs. Read the current program for government, read the Circular Economy Action Plan. There's a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurship and new employment as a result of this new way of thinking. So hopefully we'll talk a lot about that with our guests today. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce our 4 guests for the opening conversation here. I have some questions of my own to ask them over the next 20 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, you can start putting them in the chat, and the good folks at CRNI and StreamFox will be filtering those through and sending them my way so that we can try and get to as many of them as possible through the conversation. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome 4 guests for this discussion, 2 with a very much a European perspective and 2 with an Irish perspective. So representing the European perspective, we have Michal Len, who's the director of RREUSE, or REUSE, which looks at EU-level circular economy and very much supporting social enterprises in that transition. And we also have Sosa, who is a research analyst with Circle Economy, which is based in the Netherlands, but very much looks at the EU as a whole. And then representing more of the Irish perspective, we have with us Leslie Carberry, who is the principal officer leading the new Circular Economy Division for the Department of Environment and Climate and Communications. Very exciting new role that I'm interested in hearing more about. And we have Paul Goldrick Kelly, who is an economist with the Nevin Economic Research Institute based in Dublin, and very much looks at relating ecological sustainability and political economy into issues like the just transition, which is so topical right now. So welcome all of you to this conference and to the conversation. I want to start with Louise because I think you can give us an overview of what we mean by circular jobs and where your organization has seen trends going in the last few years regarding progress in circular jobs.
Thank you so much, Cara. I would like to first start with a brief introduction and probably a distinction between the linear and the circular economy, and how shifting from one to the other presents certain challenges for countries and regions. First of all, labor markets are currently deeply rooted in the linear take-make-waste economy, and will change as businesses, cities, and countries adopt circular business models and strategies. A shift to a circular economy will impact labor markets around the world. While some jobs will disappear or change in nature, new jobs will emerge as well. Certain combinations of skills will become more important, and workers and employers will be required to develop new mindsets and skills to adapt to changing environments. This is because the circular economy hinges on activities and services that are focused on reusing materials and closing material cycles, processes that are more labor and skill intensive than many activities in the one-directional linear economy. For instance, the recovery of parts for reuse or products released by a service demands reverse logistics, resource sorting, and the cleaning of components. Also, the circular economy requires manual and practical labor, just as it requires highly skilled work in the design or engineering of new solutions. Being said that, and knowing that the circular economy will change the world of work, we are presented with an opportunity. We have the opportunity to rethink not only how we manage material flows, but also how we manage people. That's why in circular economy, we created a framework to classify circular strategies / elements and type of labor that could be part of the circular economy. For us, a circular job is any occupation that directly involves or indirectly supports one of the elements of the circular economy. But you may ask, what are those strategies? What are those elements? Well, we have first core elements. Prioritize regenerative resources, stretch the lifetime of products, use waste as a resource, and we have also enabling elements. Design for the future, rethink the business model, incorporate digital technology, team up to create a joint value, and strengthen and advance knowledge. Taking those into account, we differentiate between three types of circular jobs: core, enabling, and indirect circular jobs. A core circular job is a job that ensures the closure of raw material cycles, including jobs in repair, renewable energy, waste, and resource management. An enabling circular job is one that removes barriers and enables the acceleration and upscaling of core circular activities. Those could be jobs in leasing, education, design, and digital technology, for instance. And finally, an indirect circular job is one that occurs in other sectors that do not play a direct role in furthering the transition to the circular economy, but can still adopt circular strategies. These include, for instance, jobs that provide services to core circular strategies. That could be IT services, logistics, or the public sector, for instance. Thank you, Cara.
Thanks, Luis. Thanks for giving us that overview of the situation and putting such a nice structure on it. Michael, if we could pick up with the kind of look from an EU perspective, I think there's been a lot of exciting developments around policy coming from the European Union with regards to the Green New Deal and other circular economy policies. So where do you see the opportunities for job creation in the reuse sector, and what do you think the role for social enterprises is in that?
Thanks, Cara, for the introduction. Well, indeed, at this moment in time, there's plenty of initiatives that have already been mentioned. There's a massive green wave, I would say, coming from the European Commission as a result of the pandemic, and has somehow been reinforced by the pandemic. So circularity is definitely at the heart of a lot of the I would say, the general strategies of the EU to cope with the pandemic. I think. I think it's important with all of this EU evolution that there is some kind of a cross-check as to the links between what's happening at EU level and what's happening on the ground. I think it's clear that with the movement of circularity, it was already presented earlier on, that there is a link between, for example, the work of the EU Waste Framework Directive and development into pushing more reuse and repair activities, that we're seeing, I would say, a direct impact on how Ireland is moving within its local policies. So, for example, on its rural action plan at this moment in time. I think it could be, as a result of the draft laws coming out from the circular economy strategy of Ireland, that reuse targets could be coming towards Ireland in the future, or at least it's going to be discussed. And I think that's extremely important. I think we really do need targets in order to try and encourage this whole world of evolution of reuse to really become mainstream. So I think there's a lot going on with regards to circular policies that is very very exciting. We have textiles, an action plan for textiles coming up. We have an action plan for ICT coming up. And so, yes, it's exciting, but what is the role really of social enterprise and social impact within all that? And I think that one thing it's very important to know is that the European Commission is working on a social economy action plan, which is to be published at the end of this year. And the aim for us, at least as REUSE, is to create some very strong bonds between the circular aspects and the social aspects, because this is something which, as Claire has already mentioned, is very clear. We recently published a study saying that social enterprises are creating around 70 jobs per 1,000 tons on average of material, which is reused. There's tremendous opportunities for jobs and skills, and we need to tie up these two agendas together. The European Commission has asked the OECD to create a whole study and report of how to support social enterprises in the circular economy. This is a study which will be published in the next month or so, and we really hope will reinforce this, I would say, this wave of tying up the social with the circular agenda very soon. Final notes concerning funding, maybe, because often what is the impact of EU on national level, and often we look at funding as a kind of litmus test to what is available. I think a lot can still be done at EU level with regards to orienting some major funding lines towards reuse. I think when you look at Horizon funds, for example, which is tremendously large investments into research, into up-and-coming business models, so on and so forth, the focus on product longevity is not necessarily there. So we have a kind of disconnect between political rhetoric and I would say sometimes the investment which is going in there. So we would love it if that would change. And yeah, I think it's important also to know for actors within Ireland or anybody who's interested in developing social enterprises in this space that the European Social Fund is now being renewed in the 3 regions of Ireland. And there will be lots of opportunities for organizations supporting social inclusion, or if you would like to set up an activity supporting social inclusion, there should be in the 3 regions of Ireland plenty of opportunities to be able to support these activities at national level. So do look at the ESF Plus work. And there's also a lot of work ongoing at the moment that can be helpful for social enterprises in the procurement space. The EU Commission has just published a new guide on buying social, where it explicitly links the possibilities for municipalities and encourages local authorities to support linking social objectives and circular objectives in their calls for tender. So this is, I think, something which is very important to raise as well. Sorry if I've been rambling on, but that's all for the moment.
No, that's great, because there's clearly a ton of policies coming down the pipeline that will affect us here in Ireland. So with that, I think it would be great to get the perspective from the Department of Environment on this issue. So Les, maybe you could pick up on that and tell us where you see the circular jobs occurring in Ireland, and maybe where you feel Ireland is excelling in this or falling behind in achieving some of these policies.
Thanks, Cara, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I think in terms of when we talk about circular jobs, particularly in the kind of reuse and repair space, I think there's some areas where we're doing really, really well. And that's, I would say, primarily we have a waste management sector that is increasingly transforming itself into a resource recovery sector, which is really positive and kind of a foundational for a circular economy. Additionally, then we also have a very vibrant social enterprise sector, thankfully, around reuse and repair. And as both Claire and Mary Frances said, there's a real strong natural linkage between reuse, repair, and local enterprise and social enterprises. So it makes a lot of sense there. I think broadening out maybe from areas that we don't necessarily think of as in the circular economy necessarily, there's obviously a very large refurbishment and retrofit programming happening for our building stock, and obviously keeping our existing stock in use for as long as possible will be a huge driver of the circular economy in terms of, I think, construction demolition waste is by far our largest segment of waste produced in the country. And then even kind of further, if you look at, say, the tech sector, well, it's maybe one of those indirect categories that Louise spoke about. But when we look at, either peer-to-peer reselling or sharing platforms, or business to consumer, these will be some of the kind of key infrastructural pieces that the circular economy will use as it's mainstreamed. And I think we're well set up with the tech sector we have here. In terms of where I think we could potentially be, or not, I won't say falling behind, but where we could move quicker is in things like, say, for example, reverse logistics. Because we're a small market, because we're an island on the geographic periphery of Europe, I'm not sure we're always the first place that enterprise thinks of piloting or rolling out new projects, say, for example, so again, reverse logistics in the retail sector or something like that. And, I think it would be great if, and part of what I'm doing in the department is trying to engage with enterprise to make them go, look, to make them aware of the fact that Ireland is very committed to the circular economy, and that we are open for business in terms of circular economy innovation. So that's one area. But the other key area, I think, is the mainstreaming of repair as an option across the public. I think that's where we need to do more, and we are really going to foreground that as we implement the circular economy strategy. Thanks.
Thanks, Les. Just a follow-up to that, planned obsolescence is part of the problem with a lot of things that are sold in Ireland. Is that something that you see the department acknowledging or addressing in trying to move to more of a repair system?
Absolutely. I think that is something that will have to be looked at. I will say, and it's probably in the next section of the panel, most of those issues are probably best dealt with at EU level, just given the size of our market. Product design, right to repair. These are things that we really want to see European-wide action on. And we'll be advocating for that strongly and putting the necessary skills in place to take advantage of it. But we think it needs to be on a single market-wide basis.
Thanks. Paul, you've been watching the labour markets in your work. Are you seeing trends towards circular jobs in Ireland, or is anyone actually talking about the potential for these kind of jobs here yet?
Hi, and just to thank the organisers for the invitation here. I'm grateful to speak. No, I'm glad that we had the issue of definitions and direct and indirect, because it's something actually of a tricky question depending on how you measure it. But looking through a few indicators, it seems the last few years, albeit from a fairly small base, the so-called the green economy has been growing over the last few years up to the latest point we have, which is really 2017, 2018. If you look at some of those indicators on the EU side for the circular economy, now, because we discontinued a certain data series, these are a little bit of guesswork, but it looks like we've moved from maybe 16,000 jobs in repair and reuse to something like in the region of the early 20s. And we have about 7,500 in recycling, which is a significant growth from where it was a few years ago. Although, of course, I suppose it's a relatively small portion of the aggregate economy, but you could alternatively frame that as plenty of space to grow, really. Similarly, in the green economy, given a certain definition, we've gone from about 16,000 jobs to 38,000 jobs between 2013 and 2018. A lot of that's coming through in sectors such as construction, manufacturing, real estate. So that's starting, you can see in the data, at least from the baseline, if you're looking at like year-on-year growth rates, it's pretty significant. But I suppose I would go back and it's the classic refrain, I guess, of researchers. It'd be great, really, as a kind of piece of policy going forward, to really sort of hammer in on exactly what we mean when we're talking about the circular economy, because we need that data really to evaluate how we're doing. The signs are good, but really to sort of help the circular economy take off, we really need to know where we are. So that should really be something for statistical agencies moving forward.
I mean, just transition is talked about so much with respect to climate action, but it could be a problem too with circular economy. And also, I mean, the NEST report on this has said that the digital transformation is going to have an even more damaging effect on jobs than the move to a low carbon society. What's your view on how we incorporate a just transition into this move toward a circular economy?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the just transition, of course, it's very expansive, and it sort of just means that when we're talking about a society-wide transition, such as really the move from a linear to a circular economy, the related issues around emissions, and really the kind of broader ecological crisis, we need to appreciate that we can't really ask certain communities to disproportionately bear the costs of this transition. So they need to be supported. One of the things I think that comes out of there's a lot of overlap actually. When I recently did a paper with a colleague, and my colleague Lisa Wilson, she was looking at the impacts of automation thus far in the labour market, and I was looking at emissions to see really has that happened yet. From the green kind of transition end, that looked like that was only just beginning. We're only starting to see that decoupling between job growth and aggregate emissions, maybe from about 2016 or so. So it's begun, but it's in its very early stages. And when you looked at risk sectors and the kind of classic indicators, a lot of the time there's actually overlap. Because much of really what we're talking about here is labour market transitions. That can really be the sticking point here. If jobs are to go in some sector or to substantially change, we should really have policy in place to really make sure that that doesn't just end up in unemployment, particularly when we're talking about regions which may be, mono industries to begin with, and they might be relatively deprived and disadvantaged versus, say, Dublin with far less options. So in that sense, what kind of comes out there is the need for the likes of in-job training. That's something that in our research that seems to be fairly underemphasized in Ireland, and that's really something that would be important if we're looking at a fairly dynamic labour market going forward. We have a very well-educated population, so on the one hand, we're well poised, and there's actually a lot of people who are mismatched, who are sort of in jobs that don't sort of match their skill qualification, or maybe not fully utilizing it, that could be deployed towards this end. So we have the significant resources, but really to sort of manage the transition, a lot of what the literature is pointing to is the need for that in-job training to teach you, in-job learning about the different sort of role you'd be taking on. Of course, that incorporates a very kind of large swathe of society. People who maybe their job won't change, but perhaps the tasks within them will. They'll have to learn and incorporate circular economy principles. That's just as important, really.
Thanks, Paul. Louise, I'm curious from your perspective, how do you think we can ensure that the transition to a circular economy is fair and positive for work and for workers?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing three main pillars or challenges for this positive and just transition for work and workers. Paul already mentioned one of them. I think try to skill our workforce is relevant, is a key element. We must try to train the youth and the future workforce. I think here is necessary to pay special attention to possible collaboration between private sector and the academic institutions. Vocational education and training, I think, is an important element here. Also, as Paul already mentioned, learning by doing schemes are really relevant as well. This design of effective skilled policies, I think, requires government, industry, education, research, and civil society. I mean, all of them working kind of in a quadruple ecosystem approach, if you say so, to paint a comprehensive picture of the skills needed to now and in the future to reach their targets. Second, I would mention the quality of jobs. I think working conditions are also an essential element for this positive transition for workers. The strengthening of legal frameworks, the transparency of the private sector about the real working conditions of the workforce, and probably a closer interaction between the social sector and the private sector are crucial here. Also, having trade unions like looking after their workers and closing the collaboration with the other actors is important. And finally, an inclusive labor market that could provide opportunities for people distant to the labor market. There are certain vulnerable groups that need special attention. I'm talking about people with disabilities, all population that probably might lose a job due to this transition to the circular economy, but that could be retrained and reskilled in order to take over different occupations in future industries or different business models.
Michael, what's your thoughts on what we need to look out for regarding making this just transition based on the kind of policies that are coming from Europe?
Well, I think in general, as I more or less mentioned, I think it's important to try and monitor what is the actual impact of a lot of these EU strategies, whether it's the Pact for Skills, whether it's a recovery plan, so on and so forth, in terms of actually stimulating change on the ground. For me, I think what I've already mentioned concerning the new social economy action plan, which will come out in the next by the end of the year, I think it's important to see how this plan could reinforce very concretely new working areas from the European Commission in the circular economy. So what I'm trying to say is that we have a circular economy action plan, we'll have a social economy action plan, and how can the two speak together? And I think because at this moment in time, we as RREUSE have recently published a report on jobs. Which is looking at the potential of jobs in the reuse sector, because a lot of the policies underpinning the circular economy don't have a solid database when it comes to empirical figures about what it can mean for jobs, what it can mean for social impacts, so on and so forth. And I think this is something tremendously important in terms of being able to focus on more. So maybe a new work stream which could come out as a result of this linking between the social and the circular could be a whole separate program focusing on social value in the circular economy. What does it mean and how to promote it? And I think this is something very important for us as an organization. And I think in general, if we're serious about moving towards a circular economy and we want to really stimulate jobs in there and not just focus on technological solutions, but really try and look at job-rich areas such as reuse and repair, and encourage skills which maybe are becoming more and more dormant, but will become more relevant in the future as a result of this sectoral change that Luis has already very well mentioned. I think this is what we need, and that's it.
Yeah, I asked Les there about planned obsolescence, and it's something that came up in the Q&A in Hop-In here too. So where do you think the engagement will come from within Europe with companies to make sure that products like appliances and phones are not obsolete in a year or two?
Well, there's a raft of measures at this moment in time at European level to try and reinforce this idea of a right to repair, which has already been mentioned already. And there's also a movement of the right to repair, Cara, which you have also mentioned, which is fantastic and ever growing. Some countries have legislated against planned obsolescence, such as France. They've even put it into their law, and it's quite a strong and bold move to do so. I think in order to try and combat planned obsolescence or to make our products more durable and repairable, there needs to be increased legal pressure and social pressure in order to value repairable products and durable products. And through legal approaches, we have the EU Eco-Design Directive. One key thing, which I think is very important, is that there will be a new sustainable product policy, because at this moment in time, when we talk about durability and repair, there is only really EU action with regards to energy-related products. So our electronics, for example, or our large household appliances. And it's only, legislation has only come into force with regards to repairability aspects, only for a few of those categories. So it's quite niche still. We've been focusing a lot on energy efficiency. But now what about all of the other categories? What about textiles? What about furniture, etc., which are also seeing shorter and shorter lifespans? So this new integrated product policy and sustainable product policy, which is going to be published, I believe, by the end of the year, is to try and create more of a horizontal view of what durable and easily repairable products should look like, and hopefully provide a little bit more encouragement to ensure that products coming on the European market are easily repairable and durable. And I think that's one way in which what's happening.
Yeah, it's good to hear that there's progress being made on that. Les, I think Michael and Paul have both highlighted that there's a lack of information on what are circular jobs and, you know, how many people are employed in this area. Is it something that the department is finding a challenge? Is it something you're working on in terms of trying to understand the situation better?
I'd actually even go one step further back than just the data. One of the things we felt was necessary in developing the draft strategy was just to demystify the concept of the circular economy in and of itself, you know, so that what we hope we've done in the strategy is presented a fairly clear explainer as much as anything else of what the circular economy is. And as Michael said, not just the environmental, but the social and economic aspects of it as well, and really present it as a coherent social, economic, and environmental agenda. But definitely, then I think in the next phase, as we come to implement the strategy, we will need more data. We will need to get more specific about what we're talking about in terms of what we mean by a circular product, by a circular job, and how we can measure that. So that is definitely something we'll be engaging with the CSO with. The other point I'd just like to pick up as well is in terms of the just transition. Louise mentioned it. I think, but from a policy process point of view, I think one of the really important parts is consistent multi-stakeholder engagement. That's something that characterized the development of the Waste Action Plan last year, and it's something that we're going to bake into the circular economy strategy as well. You know, I think having everyone around the table and sense checking the policy before it gets finalized is a key point.
Thanks.
Around
there's a question in
well.
the chat here from Bernadette Conley asking, when will civic amenity sites become resource recovery centers? And I would agree with that. I have one down the road from me here in Bray, and it's something that's been proposed by NGOs for over 20 years. So when do you see that happening? I think I'll just say that it's definitely something we're looking at actively. I won't kind of give any kind of guarantees around timings, but it's certainly something we're going to look at in the implementation of the strategy. Thanks. Paul, you might be able to answer this one from Veronica, looking for job site listings for circular economy in Ireland, or even a Facebook page. She says, I mean, it is a good point. There's jobs in sustainability or green jobs, but nothing that's specifically on circular jobs. Now, yeah, as I say, really getting our head around the what we mean precisely is essential, really, for it to move forward. You can't really the phrase escapes me, but essentially, if we're looking at something from a policy perspective, we're going to judge it on the basis of the data we have. So that sort of clarity will be essential moving forward, really, if we're to really take the opportunity its fullest. Mm-hmm. But nothing at the moment, as far as you know, like in terms of databases or ways of finding out. As far as I know, no, nothing kind of central like that. Although I'm open to correction on that point. Yeah, I think the breakout sessions might be able to answer that a bit more because they're actually talking to practitioners in this area. Lucy is asking about opportunities in rural communities in Ireland. I'm not sure, Michael, you talked a little bit about that already, the difference between urban versus rural. Maybe any of you could jump in there on and the role for rural communities in this circular economy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have the new rural action plan, and when you think about regenerating town and village centres and like what kind of activities really can best be localised and can't be easily shifted away somewhere, repair is really one of them. So I think there's a strong logic behind linking circular economy policy, rural renewal, training and skills, and social enterprise all around your repair agenda. Because, I mean, and if you then broaden that out to say the growing network of zero waste or zero or low packaging stores that are around the country, I mean, there's a fairly powerful retail offer there if we can get it right, that can revitalise potentially rural towns and villages.
Luis, you've heard a lot of conversation here with an Irish perspective and a European perspective. Do you have any thoughts to add from your own perspective on these issues?
Thank you, Cara. Yeah, actually, I would like to go back probably to the previous question about the job listings. I think there is an interesting ongoing, like, if I say it's a research project at the European level. This is something that the CDPOP is leading in this moment about using job listings to classify occupations for like the traditional type of jobs that we currently can find in the different industries. But I think probably next step for the circular economy could be using this classification to also kind of like reframe what the current industries are using for the different type of activities in order to probably reuse the concept that those occupations are currently using in order to probably better like frame the occupations that we will need in the future. For instance, us in Circular Economy, we launched a report for the textiles industry in the Netherlands, where basically we were using job advertisements for the repair sector, for the collection and sorting sector as well, using a different classification of the one that CDPOP uses normally. But it gave us like a really good perspective of what's going on with the textiles value chain in this moment and what the value chain needs in order to transition in a good way to the circular future. What we did was basically like putting together a quantitative arm using these job listings analysis, but also interviews, kind of like asking for feedback about what are those skills that are needed in the future. So I think that might be a good approach probably for other regions, for other countries. And finally, about the rural areas, I think it's important to pay attention to the social economy sector, to non-traditional sectors where you can find good efforts and good projects, for instance, about renewable energy. Scotland has done something with local governments regarding this topic, and there are plenty of examples about this in the global south as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. We lost you there for a minute, but you're back, luckily. Anything to add on this issue around rural communities being part of this move to a circular economy? Oh. Michael seems to have frozen. I think he's frozen. So hopefully he'll come back. I can't seem to hear or see anything. So hopefully Michael will come back there. Les, if we could move on to you, we have a question in the Q&A here about the backlog of processing permits for end of waste permits in the EPA. So do you have any insight into how that's being addressed?
So, as Mary Frances mentioned in her comments, there's going to be a circular economy bill being brought forward this year, and one of the measures that will be in that will be new regulations to basically address that backlog and to streamline the process. Okay. So it is definitely on the radar.
That's good to hear. I'm not sure, Michael, are you back? I know you've turned off your video, but is your audio working there? Okay, I hear nothing from Michael. So Paul also disappeared for a minute and is back. So we've been talking, Paul, while you were gone, about bringing rural communities along in all of this. Do you have anything to add from your perspective based on the conversation you've heard so far?
Yes, I think it really sort of linked to the just transition point and the idea of really kind of taking win-wins here. We both have areas that might be unusually challenged by transition from a linear or carbon intensive economy, and we have an ability to really generate a local kind of regional development. And it would seem to me to really have kind of helpful echoes with the likes of community wealth building initiatives that you're hearing about in the likes of the UK and the US. And it seems also complementary with the recent plans really to really use procurement as a lever to really help, to really use the kind of the heft really of the existing state and institutions that really don't leave an area to really foster development, and particularly in well-paid, long-lasting jobs. So yeah, it would seem that a really positive potential win-win that these areas are really crying out for, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned procurement. It came up in a question in the Q&A about the opportunity for public green procurement and circular economy to stimulate the area. I also know that Senator Alice Mary Higgins put forward potential legislation around this issue of being able to look at things other than just price for procurement. So do you see any changes being made in that area anytime soon?
Well, it's welcome, as I say, to see that being emphasised in the new releases from the department. The example of that the community wealth building that I referred to, it's actually promising insofar as a lot of the small contracts, local authorities, at least to my knowledge, would have a lot of leeway to actually put those kind of conditions into contracts, particularly for relatively small items, which is what a lot of small and social enterprises really would sort of engage in. And that could really, those small contracts, I mean, whether it be in food or if we're talking about here in repair and those sort of cycles, that could really develop these kind of small firms, you know. So yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, there's an existing, I would say in general, a thing to kind of appreciate about the problem is that there's a lot of path dependency here, and there's a lot of inertia, and it'll take a lot of effort, I suppose, to move this ship. And the state is really in a position to really be the coordinator in that, both in terms of planning, being proactive, as Les said, you know, involving stakeholders at every opportunity, so that really things aren't foisted upon them, and they're regionally specific, and we take advantage of regionally specific plans and that sort of know-how that's in an area rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. And yeah, as we've been discussing just now, the procurement is an existing lever before you even build in any of those social dialogue mechanisms, which might not be as common or might be more new to Ireland.
Yeah, so you're saying even without new legislation, this is something that at least at the local level, councils could start building into their procurement decisions. Yes.
At least the example of other countries now I know, and I'm referring to community wealth building, that'd be Preston in the UK. There were questions around, you know, the EU rules, etc., procurement rules, state aid. but they managed it. Most of that program happened while the UK was within the EU. So it stands to reason. And the UK is similar in many senses to Ireland in that it's very centralised and local authorities aren't really as large as in much of the rest of Europe. And yet still, that comparable example managed to do very good things. A lot of money that previously left the area stayed there, and that seems really of a piece with the whole circular economy concept, both materials and value, try and centre that in an area.
Yeah, great. Les, you're at the front lines of large-scale procurement, I think, as part of the government. Where do you see this issue going in terms of national decisions on public procurement?
Yeah, so we definitely see green public procurement as a major driver of the circular economy, and to that end, it's very handy that our new Minister of State with responsibility for the circular economy in the department is also the Minister of State with responsibility for public procurement, Minister Oisin Smith. So that's joined up government in action. We would be working with the OGP or the Office of Government Procurement on a fairly ongoing basis to look at actioning the commitments in the programme for government around introducing green criteria into public procurement. But part of that involves dealing with all the sectors, so particularly the local government sector, in terms of helping them green their procurement. And because they, as Paul said, they'd have a lot of their suppliers would be at the local level and would be in the SME sector. Part of the work that's happening is the EPA has rolled out training for procurers in public bodies, and this year they're now also starting to provide GPP training for suppliers as well, because the feedback we've gotten is that while large businesses probably can look after a GPP themselves in terms of they have the ability to meet those requirements, it's really the SME sector that might need help in terms of how do they, if there's a tender with green criteria out there, how does an SME successfully compete for that? So that's a strand of work we've got going at the moment.
Thanks. Just ask out of curiosity, the deposit and return scheme on plastic bottles and aluminium cans has been talked about a lot. Where are we at in making that a reality?
So the work is proceeding at pace, as I understand it. I'm not working on it directly, but as far as I understand it, the first consultation has been done in terms of options, and now there's work. I believe there's a working group established looking at a specific scheme design, and that is, I think that's on pace to be introduced on time. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact date, but I think we're going to start seeing specific scheme design options this year, certainly.
Great to hear. So we have a few minutes left just to wrap up, and if Luis, I know we've had problems with the audio where certain guests can't hear me but can hear the other guests. So Luis, if you can hear me, wonder if you could turn your mic on there to give us any final thoughts you've had based on the conversation. Okay, I don't see Luis. So if he doesn't come back, maybe Paul, we could move to you for any final comments.
Yeah, I suppose for as much as I was able to join you for, the kind of key takeaway really for me is that when you're sort of dealing with an issue this complex, we need a lot of joined up thinking, and we need to consider social and environmental dimensions here, and that's really at the heart of social enterprise. I suppose I'm speaking to the right audience on that one. But yet the moving forward, really, this represents a massive opportunity. We shouldn't rebuild post-COVID in as we were before. We shouldn't rebuild the same. So we're really kind of looking to a challenge, and to my mind, really, the circular economy screams out as a potential solution here to really meet a lot of goals and a lot of things. I mean, the regional divide in Ireland is a very old problem, for example. I mean, when we looked at this a few years ago, myself and my colleagues, it looked like we were now accounting for all the shenanigans surrounding GDP and how much you can trust those figures, etc. But it looks like Ireland is among one of the most sort of unequal regionally countries in Europe. It's very comparable to the likes of the UK in that regard. And there's a lot of divides really between small and larger businesses, and this sort of policy could really start filling in that gap really to build forward and build in a more kind of resilient fashion as we move into the next decade and recover.
Yeah, thanks. Here's hoping for all of that. Les, final thoughts based on what you've heard.
Thanks. I think I suppose the one aspect that I neglected to mention, I suppose, was the digital transformation as well and the linkages. I mean, with the rollout of high-speed broadband across the country, that really then you can be a circular designer working for a company abroad. You can be a e-seller or a reseller on an e-commerce site, or a logistics supply chain manager from anywhere in Ireland once we have broadband rolled out. So I think when we think about the circular economy and its impact on a regional basis, as Paul was saying, we don't want to just focus on the physical jobs that can be done on a local level. We also want to think about the fact that these can be diversified across the country when we factor in digital.
Thanks, Les. Luis, if you can hear me now, I know you missed some of the conversation, but I'd be interested in hearing your final thoughts based on what you did hear. And I'm not hearing Luis.
Thank you, Cara. Topic
Okay.
For the European region, but also for other regions in the world. I would like to say as a conclusion that the circular transition needs to be positive for all of us, and in order for that to happen, we need further collaboration among the different actors. That's government, that's private sector, that's also the social economic sector, and we also need to come up with probably new jobs frameworks. We need to keep discussing what are the best definitions to measure circular jobs, and we need to try to measure them in order to monitor if what we are doing and proposing in terms of policy making process, it's helping in our labor markets. Thanks so much, Cara.
Thanks so much, Luis. Glad you managed to get your tech back there. And Michael, I know you also had problems with your tech, but based on the bits that you did pick up, do you have any final thoughts to wrap up this session of the conference? We just need to unmute you there. I still have you on mute. So yeah. Oh dear. Okay. Technology fail. So oh, Michael, your audio seems to be on now. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Great.
Is it okay now? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Sorry about that. No, just to reiterate my points. I think now is the time to invest in more research and understanding as to the social value in the circular economy, what it is and how to actually promote it, and to make it very clear and tangible to public authorities, national governments, about the importance of the role of social enterprise within this circular transition, and not just social enterprise, but in general job creation, how we can access these new products and services to make them accessible to all different parts of our community, whatever income level, etc. And I think, yeah, it's great that we're discussing this, and thank you to CRNI for having put jobs and skills on the agenda. I think it's extremely timely, and we can only applaud you for this initiative, so thanks a lot.
That's great. Well, we can't end on a better note than that. So with that, I'd just like to thank all of our panelists today, Les, Louise, Paul, and Michael, and especially for your staying power through the technical difficulties that you experienced. And thanks to the guys at Streamworks for doing the technology side on the back end, and of course the CRNI for hosting this event. So I will now hand back to Claire so she can talk about the breakout sessions for the rest of the afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much, Cara, and everyone, and for plugging through those broadband issues. Was good that Cara and Les both had excellent connections and everyone else struggled a bit, but that was so interesting and we're getting great feedback from the chat. So thank you very much for very capable hosting of that. And quite a few of the topics we'll deal with in the breakout sessions came up, which was great, particularly the focus on rural, the focus on social, and the focus on tech. So next up, what we have is 3 breakout sessions. They're going to open at 3:15, so we're quite on time. You have a 5-minute break and you can go into the expo area or the networking area. And we will hear actual experiences on the ground from our members who are practitioners in this area. So you'll have a choice of 3, as I mentioned. One of the breakout sessions will really focus on creating rural jobs in the circular economy. One of them will focus on jobs with social impact, and one of the breakouts will focus on circular and tech jobs. So in the rural jobs discussion, I will be talking to Linda Ward from Charity Shops Association and Trina Dennehy from IRD Do Hello Furniture Revamp. In the social impacts, we'll have Una Lavelle from Recycle It and Martin Ward from Bounce Back Recycling. And in the circular and tech jobs, we'll have Emma Connors from Recreate and Avian O'Brien from Food Cloud. So please, at this stage, leave the main stage and you can have a little look around and then head into the sessions button, which is the 3rd one down on the left-hand side, and you'll be able to choose which session you want to join. So thank you very much.